So I'm going to show you how I do my tea towels. I did enlarge each one of the designs that were on the original CD from Kimberbell so that you could put it on an apron, a towel, a pot holder, anything you want to put it on. So with the shamrock, it measures about 5 by 5. I always print it out in my software. If you don't have a program that you're able to print out the picture to kind of get the size, as soon as you put that design in your machine or bring it up on your computer, however, it will tell you the size, the outline measurements of the design. So you don't necessarily have to print it out. So you can kind of guess how big it's going to be on this project. And when you put it in the machine, it will, this is tipped sideways. If you don't want it tipped sideways, you're going to go into your design page and you're going to rotate it a little bit. Now this is the original way it was, and I just enlarged it. So in other words, on the mug rug, it also is tipped sideways, and I just like the way that looks. But again, if you don't like it, rotate it on the machine before you start. But I like it that way, so I'm going to leave it. So that's the first thing I do is I print that out. And like I said, you don't have to, but you got to try to figure out what the size is and where you want it on the project that you're going to do the embroidery on. I just marked the center. Usually the software will mark the center, but I must not have had that option checked. Then I cut a piece of fabric that's big enough that I know is going to be big enough for that whole applique. And I did back that with SF101. I should buy stock in the SF101 company because I use SF101 a lot. But it just makes that, especially when for machine embroidery, it just holds that fabric nice so that you don't get puckers, and it just looks a lot better. Then the second thing I did was I took my tea towel. This is just a regular tea towel that I purchased, and I folded up 1 inch, right side up, and then I folded it to the back side. Doesn't really make, or I folded it to the front side. Doesn't make any difference. I did about 1 inch. The reason why I did that is because I want a crease there. Usually I like to leave just a little bit below my strip of the color of the towel showing. Then if I want to put something on it when I'm done, these are just some of the different rickrack trims that I had. So then I like to put it like along the edge. Or you can do a decorative stitch with your sewing machine, or you can just leave it plain. This strip I cut is 3 inches. Then I serged the edge. It's easier to serge the edge because you're going to keep your 3 inches. When you're trying to fold it under each side, very rarely do you end up with a nice same width all the way along. That's why I like to serge it. So I serged it, and then that is where the guideline for me, when I stitch that on, that's the guideline that I'm going to have, that crease mark for where I had folded it up 1 inch. And I do that so that I don't have to put any marks on the towel at all. Then the next thing that I do, I guess, is I'm going to do, before I stitch any of this down, I'm just going to lay this on here, and I'm going to decide where I want my embroidery to be. Now, if I didn't have this piece of paper, I would measure up like 5 inches because the design is about 5 by 5, and then I would center it right in the center of my towel, however far up I want it. And that's where I would put my pin or my mark. I just have this needle laying here. So that's where I'm going to, when I put the design in the embroidery machine, that's where I'm going to start the design or center it. It doesn't necessarily going to start there, but that's my center point of my design. The center point of your design and the start point are never the same. So when you center a design, you want to center it in the center of where the placement stitch is. Then once the machine starts, it will jump to wherever it needs to start. So I'm going to shut the camera off and I'm going to set up the embroidery machine. So now I'm going to show you how I hoop my towel. So I've put I'm going to use cutaway stabilizer, just a lightweight cutaway because it's an applique, it's not dense, it's not going to wrinkle. And I did use the SF101 on the back of my fabric. So I laid my hoop here, and I'm going to bring this down over the top of it. That was the center of where I want my design. So then I'm going to take my plastic grid. I always use my plastic grids, and I'm going to center it in the middle of my hoop. And this is the center of the plastic grid, which signifies that's the center of the hoop that I'm using. So both of those line up, the pin mark. Then I'm going to take my top hoop and I'm going to push it down. Then I kind of judge the distance from here to here. I'm going to take this out of here to see if I have it straight or what I think is pretty straight. Then too, if I look here to here, that looks pretty identical as far as I snapped it in there fairly straight. You also can tell when you lay your grid in there if it's crooked one way or the other. Now, because this design is rotated, so if it is a little bit crooked on here, it won't make a lot of difference. So I'm going to leave it. I'm happy with the way that looks. I'm going to leave my pin in there until I put my design in the machine, and that's how I'm going to center it, and then I will take the pin out. Okay, hopefully you can see this okay. I have the design loaded on my 6 needle, and because I used my template, my plastic template, and the last needle I used was needle number 6, and I just put this hoop in the machine, and if I bring needle number 6 down, you can see it lands almost perfectly on that pin where I wanted it, the center of the design to be. So if I always use my plastic template, and I see people in class, if I have a beginning class or and I see their templates and they still have the plastic on them and you can tell they've never been used, my question is, how do you get your designs centered so that they stitch straight? So that's how I do mine. So basically, this is just the applique part of the design, and it's not going to stitch anything else. So when you follow the instructions that either you printed out or from your computer, where you'll start will be, you'll start down like after the quilting stitch step. So, and because I've already resized this design, there won't be as many steps. Let me take my machine into the sewing mode. There's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's the placement of the shamrock is where it's going to start. It's not going to even stitch any of them because I deleted those all out of there. So the first thing to stitch will be number 5, which is the placement for the shamrock. So you're going to stitch that directly onto, whoops, I want it to start on needle number 6. Well, I guess it's on needle number 2. It doesn't necessarily make any difference. I actually have green thread on there too. I wouldn't want it to be pink thread or something, but because it's green, I'll just leave it. I'm gonna get the out of there. And this, because I don't have only the stabilizer and tall on there, hopefully it will stitch a little better. It's not stitching through all that thickness, so it should be okay. I'm going to flip it over and see how the backside looks. Looks good. So I will put it, I guess I could put that's the placement stitch for my piece of fabric. I'm just going to put a little bit of spray on the back of my piece of fabric. And I'm going to lay that over the placement line, making sure that it completely covers all the stitching area. And then I'll stitch the next step, which will tack it down. So now I'll see if I can step in front of the camera here without you viewing me, and you can see a little bit of how I trim. Remember I said that normally when I trim really close. But with the Kimberbell designs, I've noticed that I need to leave a little bit on the outside edge. There you can kind of see how much I've left there. And that's because their zigzag satin stitch is pretty wide. I'm a little close there. So I'm going to go out just a little bit farther. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to finish trimming it, and then I'll come back. And there you can see I'm all finished trimming, and it's pretty even. That should work out pretty good. Sorry about that. Obviously, you probably heard my phone ring. I hate to not have it in here because I am expecting a phone call. Okay, there it's back in the machine, and I'm going to stitch the next step, which will be the satin stitch around the outside. And I think I'm going to do that in the darker green like I did on the other one. As you can see, that's doing a really nice job. It did a nice double outline around here, and it did not stop like it did on the smaller one, and all I did was enlarge it. So I'm not sure. I didn't change the digitizing at all. It looks like there's one little loose spot right there, but otherwise the satin stitch outline looks pretty good. Well, as you can see, the design finished, and as it was doing the satin stitch outline, I walked out of the room and forgot to push the button that makes the machine stop in between each one of the colors. So it went ahead and finished the design. Whatever color number that this was on the machine is what color the machine stitched. And that particular one, this one is light blue, was programmed to stitch on number 4, which was where the blue is. I totally intended to do a stop in between, but like I said, I forgot to push reserve stop on the machine before I walked out of the room. So it did this in black, which is okay. I'm not real fond of the blue, but it is what it is, and I'm not going to change it. So I will set up my regular machine, stitch the border on here, and maybe a little bit of rickrack, and it will be done.